Some of the most prominent cohort-based courses in the world, like Rite of Passage, are winding down. Were cohort-based courses overhyped? Oh my God, I have a post prepped about this. What a great question.
Gagan Biyani, co-founder of Udemy and founder and CEO of Maven, shares insights from his journey.
We had a very clear philosophy at Udemy, which was grow at all costs, right?
So you've said that I engaged founder mode a few years ago and it completely changed my experience as a leader. What does founder mode mean to you?
I've realized that I need to make the final decisions on the most important things. And so I put my foot down a few different times.
What were the big levers for you to grow that NRR?
When we started, we had something like a 10% or 4% super low, like single digits NRR. So essentially all of our instructors churned, our first set of instructors.
What's your best advice for a laid-off job seeker?
Don't just spend all your time.
Gagan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Akash.
So some of the most prominent cohort-based courses in the world, like Rite of Passage, are winding down. Were cohort-based courses overhyped?
Oh my God, I have a post prepped about this. What a great question. I think we're just going through a natural evolution of a space. So in the beginning of a space, this happened for Sprig as well in the food delivery space. You see bespoke, verticalized players that come in and try to run every part of an operation. So in the case of Sprig, we were a food delivery company that owned the restaurant, that built the app, and owned the delivery network. And we built an amazing product that was beloved by our users, which is very similar to Rite of Passage or building a second brain. Unfortunately, usually those first versions of business ideas don't end up having longevity. And the reason is because actually there's a lot more value to be created when people specialize in a market economy. And so in the case of food delivery, what actually ended up happening was Sprig eventually died. Sprig died because a new model was more successful than Sprig, which was essentially having a delivery-focused product offering or a company, and then also having the food be separate, and frankly also to some extent separating out the delivery drivers from the delivery application. And that was DoorDash and Uber Eats. And I think we're seeing the same thing happen in cohort-based learning. Cohort-based learning started with bespoke, these beautiful experiences, Alt MBA, Rite of Passage, building a second brain. People put a lot of capital into them. They were spending, I don't know the exact numbers, but I assume hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year in operating expenses on team members. And they were trying to deliver the best possible product given what they had. Unfortunately, that creates a high capital bar for revenue. You need to make more. You need to make 3 times more revenue than you're spending, and that was just really, really hard to sustain for a long haul. What we're seeing now at Maven is we're growing as fast as we've ever grown. And we have, and our growth is our instructors' growth. So essentially what that means is, there are, over $10 million a year. It's more than that, but happening on Maven's platform of course sales that instructors are earning, 90% of the revenue for. And what the reason why that works is, and these instructors are getting 80 to 90% margins.
Today's episode is brought to you by June, the customer analytics for product-focused teams. Are you not sure what users do in your SaaS? What features they use the most? Do you wish that you could know what each company does and use this information to generate incremental lift in revenue? June is the product analytics platform you need. It generates profiles for each of your customers that get you closer to your most important ones. It also connects your product data to your CRM so you can get a full view of your customers in one place. So you can engage with the right message at the right time. What makes June different is that it's made for B2B SaaS. It comes with account-level analyses, fast ways to look up your customers, and CRM integrations to share this information between your product, your success, and sales teams. And one line of code is all you need, and you're good to go. Sign up for a free trial today at june.so/akash. That's june.so/AAKASH. You get a discount if you use my link. The future of marketing is word of mouth. Turn your users and partners into your most valuable growth channel with podcast partner Cello. Cello is the only all-in-one solution to engage your most passionate users and partners to refer your product with just a few clicks. Best of all, Cello is directly embedded into your product and handles everything from referral payments to tax and compliance. And it runs on autopilot, so you can focus on scaling and building your own product. Here's how it works. First, within just a few hours, Cello integrates with your product and existing tools to automate all manual work. In your dashboard, you can then set up your referral campaign, define the reward details, and make the referral experience your own. After the program goes live, Cello continuously analyzes and scales its performance based on AI-generated recommendations. Plus, you only pay if you're successful. Go give it a try for free and learn more about user-led growth at cello.so/product growth.
So it's an insanely different business, whereas, your Alt MBA or some other of these companies might be getting more like 20 to 50% margin. They are owning all the operations, whereas on Maven, you don't even need any full-time staff to run on Maven. And all of a sudden, you as an instructor can focus on two things, building your audience so that people want to buy your course, and you can also focus on creating the course and making sure that it's really valuable to the user. And you don't need to spend the money on operating your course, which is actually like the most expensive part. And Maven handles all of that for you now. So I don't think it's just Maven that's part of this new trend. Obviously, there are other companies, but I think that we're just seeing an evolution in cohort-based learning, and it's going to become more mainstream, actually, rather than the other way around. Obviously, I'm biased and believe that, but I think what I saw at Sprig was that after the collapse of the first set of food delivery companies, the second generation, if you will, DoorDash, Postmates, Uber Eats, actually became even bigger and bigger and bigger. So I expect the same thing to happen here.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that there's this human cost. And in doing my research about Maven, I learned that you also, when you were dealing with evolving the business, thought about this human cost and decided to get rid of some of that. So you actually let go of half the company, the instructor services team. What happened there?
Yeah, we almost made the same mistake I made at Sprig, which was I'm really glad we didn't. When we started the company, we realized that there was a real opportunity to help creators who had like 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 followers monetize their audience. And we were right. We made them a ton of money. We made $4 million in the first 4 months or something in course sales. That's like super good for a first, 4 months in business. But unfortunately, there was a real challenge. Sorry, it's a $4 million run rate within the first 4 months, just to be clear. But it's still super good. So that's $1 million. And the problem though was that the highest value creators, the creators with the most audience, they are extremely busy and they needed help putting up their courses. And so we followed the dollars. We were like, these creators are awesome. Let's build whatever they want us to build. What they wanted us to build was a team that was going to do the work for them to create the course and run and operate the course. However, they did not value that at the same cost that it cost us to deliver it. And you see this with building a second brain and write a passage, to draw it back to last thing, which is that, these creators, Alt MBA, similar, did not want to outsource the operations because they thought that they were going to be able to save on the fees that they would have to pay to a platform. Actually, it turned out to be exactly the opposite. It turns out that the operations are one of the most expensive things that you have to do when you're running a cohort-based business. And as a result, what we realized at Maven was we had to automate the operations, and we had to accept a different type of instructor who was willing to modify their customer experience and to do a little bit more operational work, not a lot, in order to run their courses. And so we ended up pivoting not just from getting rid of this team and not providing services anymore to instructors where we were running the operations for them, but we also changed the instructor profile to be instructor profiles who are more experts and less creators. So they still have audiences. Most of our instructors have, 5,000, 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. There's a lot that have more. However, their mindset is different. They view this as a primary revenue stream and are willing to put the effort in to do it and are using our software to sort of automate 80 to 90% of what they need to do. But that last 10 and 20% they do themselves, whereas the bigger creators didn't want to do any of it. And I honestly think this is just like a funny thing, watching a bunch of people basically like have a $2 to $5 million business at their fingertips, but being unwilling to make the correct business decisions to actually like take advantage of it, which is just like a kind of a controversial thing for me to say, but I'm just going to say it. Like, you basically just have to make the right calculus, and it's really, really hard. For what it's worth, I think something slightly different happened with BASB, Building a Second Brain, and Rite of Passage. Those are not the people I'm talking about. But I'm more talking about the creators who have big audiences who just wanted to do a course to make money but didn't want to do any of the operations themselves. So you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're damned if you try to run all the operations, and you're damned if you try to run none of them. You kind of have to do a little bit, and then you have to work with a platform or a software that sort of helps you get to the rest of the value proposition.
So do the top instructors like Shreyas Doshi, do they still have like staff that are helping them with their course?
I don't know. I don't know that I can share the specifics of Shreyas, so I'm just going to talk in generalities. There are very few instructors on Maven who have a full-time staff member dedicated to Maven. They might have a full-time staff member like an executive assistant or an operations person on their team because they run multiple businesses and it just makes sense to amortize that over multiple businesses. But the vast, vast majority of our instructors have no full-time help at all. They are using part-time coaches occasionally. And honestly, they're able to do a lot of it themselves because over the last 4 years, we've built a lot of software at Maven. So that software automates things. And the instructors have figured out how to use it in a way that really delivers still an amazing experience and at the same time does not require as much operational load.
Got it. Makes sense. So it's all about running your business efficiently if you want to sustain. So one of the other areas of skepticism that people might have about Maven is that kind of the other prominent half of Maven, your co-founder Wes, left the team. What's the story there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's normal, right? Like I left Udemy at my company Sprig. Like half the founding team wasn't there when we ended, or actually only one out of the four of us. So three of us stuck around. But I've never really heard of a founding team where all of the co-founders stuck around. I have heard of it. I just thought of Airbnb as an example where they stuck around for a fairly long time, but it's rare. In most cases, you're going to lose one or two co-founders along the way. And that doesn't mean that they weren't amazingly valuable when they were there. Like Wes was awesome. Like she's super smart. But at some point it just made sense for her, for what she wanted to do in her career, to move on and become a creator and focus on that. And I think it's kind of normal, honestly, to have some leadership changes as a company grows.
Okay. You've said most online courses suck. Why?
Well, there are a couple reasons. One is that there's a perverse incentive, as there are in most markets, but essentially like marketing a course is really, really hard. And teaching a course is also really, really hard. And most people are only good at one of the two things. So the most online courses, what I really mean is the online courses that get traction, they get traction because the instructors are really good at marketing their course, but they're not very good at teaching it. And so that's a huge problem. And that gets exacerbated by this model of asynchronous courses. So, obviously I sort of helped popularize this model through Udemy, but I think that it has real drawbacks. And there's a bunch of people out there who basically sell videos. They just sell access to a bunch of video content for in the case of Udemy, it's $15. In the case of, other places, it could be hundreds or thousands of dollars. And these product offerings are just not very good, but they're really easy to market. And so you have this massive imbalance where, it's really easy to buy a $15 course and just be like, it doesn't matter whether I use it or not. And so you have this massive imbalance where the product isn't actually being used, but people are still buying it. And that's what's created this challenge. And what we're trying to do with cohort-based courses is we think people are smart. We think consumers realize when they make decisions that are not to their benefit, and eventually they correct themselves. And so, the average video-based course has a probably like a 5 to 15% completion rate. Average Maven course, engagement rate. Completion's really hard to define, so we use the word engagement. But 5 to 15% engagement rate. Average Maven course has an 80 to 90% engagement rate. So it's a massive difference in the value that we're providing.
Okay, yeah. That's like the kind of the biggest critique of online education in general is like people aren't checked in when the content is being delivered, and then they rarely complete it. So how does an online cohort-based course solve those problems?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? This is a product podcast. Let's talk about it from a product perspective. The most effective way to improve a product is to completely overhaul the fundamental underpinnings of what that product is. So we didn't just take a video-based course, right, and try to make it like 10% or 20% more engaging. We decided to reinvent video-based courses in the cohort-based format, essentially bringing back the old school college classroom and delivering that over the internet, right? So why does this work? Well, a cohort-based course we define as just being a course that has a distinct start and end time where a group of people take that course at the same time together. So we don't actually care whether or not the course is asynchronous or live. We expect them to be a combination of both. But what we care about is the accountability and the feedback loop that you get when you take the course with other people at the same time and with your instructor. And so it's kind of crazy. It's a crazy part of human nature, but learning is really hard. It takes a lot of work. It's very, when you have things like TikTok distracting you or, your kids or whatever other things, it's really hard to get motivated to show up. And so what a cohort-based course does is say, hey, there's like 50 other people are going to show up. If you don't show up, you're probably never going to do it. So you have this moment where you're like, am I going to take this seriously or not? You usually pay more money. So you pay $500 to $1,000. It's like a lot more money than, a $20 Udemy course. And so you're more invested. And as a result of all of these combination factors, you end up having much higher engagement rates.
Yeah, I think that it's a lot of psychological concepts layered on top of each other, right? Social accountability, sunk cost in terms of actually investing a lot into it. So I really like those elements of it. And what I think maybe people don't understand if they haven't taken one yet is you kind of need to experience it to understand some of these benefits. And a lot of people listening, they probably are considering it because it feels like from the outside, product management is one of the biggest categories on Maven. Is it?
Yes, it's our biggest category if you exclude AI, which is not a verticalized category exactly. So yes.
So what are the top PM courses?
Oh, I mean, you named Shreyas Doshi's courses on product sense and building a PM career. You've got Satish Mumareddy's courses on product thinking and influence without authority. There are a ton of other really great ones. We should just put them in the show notes because honestly, like and Marilee Nika's AI product management course, as well as Mikdad Jaffer's AI product management course. So these are some of the top courses on Maven, and you can basically go on our website and we have a top 10 list, so you can always see which are the courses that are being successful right now.
Okay, got it. So these are they sound like PM career upskilling courses for existing PMs. These people are buying them, and I think it's kind of natural. PM is one of those types of jobs where you just don't have a degree, right? And so people are kind of always looking to upskill.
Yeah, I think you also just have like the most motivated group of people, right? A PM is someone who has to be good at a lot of different things and has to be super business curious as well as, have some craft. And so there's a multitude of skills that you need to build in order to be a successful PM. And PMs are super motivated. So you have this great combination. And that's why it's really successful for online learning. And just to touch on another point you made, our courses are targeted at mid-career professionals for upskilling because we believe that they are underserved by modern learning options. If you're in your first 2 years of your career, you're either learning on the job or you're willing to slog through a Udemy course, right? But if you're 5 years into your career, you operate by your calendar. And if something isn't on your calendar, you're not going to get it done. And so, we put courses on your calendar and they're higher priced because you make more money now and can afford it. And you can invest in your career for, a few $1,000s a year. Like you can basically, double your income over, 5 years if you learn the right skills. So it's an incredible value to them to product managers, and also it is custom for what Maven's product offering is. Maven isn't a product for every type of person. It's a product for this mid-career upskilling professional.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, product also has one of those really trimodal distributions of salaries where like if you're a product manager at the lowest distribution, just moving up to the higher level, you can like 40% increase your salary. And if you move up to the highest level, the big tech companies, some people are like doubling and tripling their salaries in short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, you can go from like 100 to 120K as like a junior PM, all the way up to $1 million as a senior PM, like a much more senior PM at like a GPM or something at a bigger company. So it's a big opportunity, and I think that is part of one of the reasons why you see a hunger to learn, because if you learn things that get you to that endpoint faster, you're more likely to, benefit from the upside of that.
Okay. So moving on to the importance of product management, you've said some think product managers are useless, but I found they're worth their weight in gold. Why?
I think different styles of companies and different types of founders see benefits in different things. And so, you might have a very engineering heavy company that is essentially building a product for engineers, AKA like a Stripe. And they're like, we don't use product managers. I'm like, of course you don't. Like, you are literally the user of your own product as engineers. And so the people building it are building it for other engineers. Why would you need a product manager? Or, I mean, I still think there could be value in a product manager, but I'm just saying that it's not nearly as important. At Maven, we're building a product for end users who are different from ourselves on some level, but more importantly, who are not their needs and use cases are not intuitive to an average engineer or even a potentially designer, although our designers are quite full stack nowadays. So they're pretty good at understanding, and our engineers are too. But ultimately, a product manager has the greater level of insight into what that customer wants, and then is able to provide the scaffolding to get the job done on time, to get the to ship the product, and finally to understand the business context so that the prioritization decisions they're making are based on data and insight about where the business is going and what it needs. So there's this triple requirement of triple benefit of a PM, which is that they handle all three of these things. And so even though there are plenty of engineers and designers like on our team who we think could do like a pretty good job at PMing, we unlock them by having a centralized product manager who does those three tasks so that the engineers and designers can go and do the things that they're the best at. So I think PMs are critical to a successful startup. And maybe there are certain exceptions where you don't need a PM as much, but I think in most cases, most SaaS products, most marketplaces, like PMs are essentially one of the central hubs of your company.
Yeah, that's what I've found too. Although one area where I think we might differ is when to hire a PM. So I believe you guys have a team of 18, you have a PM, you might be hiring for another one as far as my research tells. What do you think is kind of like right point to hire a PM? My traditional advice has been a little bit later than that, actually, like once you get to like 3 or 4 engineering teams. So I'm curious why the earlier strategy to hire a PM.
I think it's stylistic. I know what I'm good at. I'm not good at being a PM. So there are plenty of founders out there who are really good PMs. Like that's a common track, right? Become a PM and then go and found a company. And so if you're already a good PM, then of course you don't need to hire one. The same way like Maven didn't hire a head of marketing for 2+ years because Wes and I were both very good marketers. It didn't make sense. So I think you just you optimize for whatever team you have, and you construct, of course, a founding team based on your expectation of what you need to get done, and then you hire for the gaps. And in my career, PMs have been early hires at both my companies, and it's been super valuable to have that partner to help execute on sort of my vision and to create their own vision and build it going forward.
So what is your guidance for somebody who's looking to become kind of that first PM at a startup? Let's say a smaller startup like Maven. Like, what are kind of the things that they should be building up as their catalog of experiences to be qualified for the position? And then B, like, what should they expect that PM job to look like versus maybe a PM job at a bigger company?
Yeah. So I think Gokul has a good post about this from the founder's perspective, and I think it applies to early stage PMs as well, like in the reverse. It's like if you want to become an early stage PM, you kind of have 3 tracks, right? One is you are already at the company as an engineer or a designer and you transition into being a PM. Maybe you start as an analyst and then you switch into a PM. That's like pretty common and can work. And it's always great when PMs have specialized skill sets, so that's helpful. The second one is sort of your quote unquote business school PM. Doesn't need to be from business school, but needs to be someone. In fact, I don't think that's really that. I'm not anti business school, but I'm also not super pro business school. I'm probably very neutral on it. And so like I think that your business school PM is just someone who is a really good business person who feels like they and who picks up the PM skills over time. Like you usually need to learn them and do them on the job at some company that you're at. So you need to be put in charge of a product, or you need to mock up something or come up with a new idea and galvanize a small team. So you have to do some PM activities at your previous company. And then a startup that doesn't have access to the top tier PMs because they're small and unknown takes a chance on you. And that's, I think, quite common. And then the third way is you're an experienced PM and you've worked at other companies, but at a later stage. And it's very hard to go from a PM at Google or Facebook or something really big, but you can easily go from a mid-sized company, right? A PM at Robinhood or a PM at at Loom or something like that. Those companies that have only recently hit the billion or $5-10 billion valuation marks are great places to hire PMs, and where PMs should try to utilize and leverage that to take more risk and go earlier stage. So those are some tracks that I think work. Your second question was about what they should expect. Again, like I said earlier, like it's highly stylistic. Like different founders have different expectations of people, but I think that there are some universal realities, and some of them will be custom to who I am and how I operate. First, I'd say like they should expect having a lot more ownership than they were used to. Like as a PM, you're kind of the second in command for a company. You usually don't see a COO come in until way later stage, so you're gonna have a PM first, and that person needs to be an expert not only on the business and where the business is headed, what the financials are, what the growth is like, where what the founder sees as the strategy, but also super detail oriented on actually like shipping product on a daily basis. So you'll see a massive widening of your scope in early stage PMing. The other thing that you'll find is that you won't have a lot of data. Early stage companies, you do not have the ability to rely on A/B testing and data-driven decision-making the same way you can at bigger companies. So by by the consequence of that is that you have to be much more of a gut-driven decision maker. You have to be able to make decisions. You want to look at the data because there still is some data usually, but you don't want that data to be overwhelmingly deciding your decision, your sort of strategy. And this is a really hard balance for a lot of people who are used to and have gotten accustomed to sort of the growth hacking or like modern amplitude using, mixed panel using PM, who just sort of relies entirely on like, this is what the data says, I'm going to do what the data says, like, et cetera. That doesn't really work at the early stage.
Yeah, I can imagine that. We're talking about maybe like hundreds of instructors in one variant and hundreds in the other, and that's not going to really hit significance in 2 weeks. So you have to be able to find other ways to judge the success of something. So what do you lean on? How do you look at, like, we did this big change in the platform, was it successful or not?
It's really hard. I'll be honest. Like it's usually you're just guessing. And so you're just trying to educate your guests as much as possible because, like, let's say that without having any data or any information at all, your accuracy on something is like 10%. That sounds about right. Maybe it's a little bit higher, but, let's say it's 10%. Your goal is to try to get to 30 or 40%. So how do you do that? First, you have to have deep customer insight. So you need to understand the psychology of your consumer so that your decisions are in line with what they want. And so you intuitively know what people want, right? Think about something like charisma. It's really hard in, when you're trying to make friends and influence people to have data to tell you whether or not you're like actually influencing the person in front of you, right? Because there's only like 5 people in front of you at a given time, or even 1 or 2. And so you rely on your intuition. So you need to do the same thing. You need to have that same level of intuition that Dale Carnegie follower has, but you need to have that for your customer. And so that intuition is super important. The second thing is that you need to have you need to try to get as much data, both quantitative and qualitative, as possible. So that's doing interviews before and after a product is launched. That is closely following the behavior and taking signal from the behavior, even if it isn't statistically significant. And what that means is that you're not just looking at, hey, this, we shipped this and 50% of people converted, and our conversion rate used to be 40%. You're looking at 50% of the people converted, and like they mostly converted, they were mostly these types of users, and these types of users are our core market, or actually 50% converted, but none of them paid, that kind of thing. They converted to give the email, but maybe they didn't pay, and so there's a lot of different nuances to looking at the data when you have less data, but you still need to look at the data. And then the final thing is, I do believe it's valuable to understand industry trends and just learn from experts. I think I'm hard pressed to find anyone who's successful in startups and tech and business. I'm sure that they exist, but who don't follow the industry trends of what's going on in their industry, at least, and oftentimes across industries. And that's through, Twitter and LinkedIn. That's through podcasts like yours. That's through going to conferences, and it's also through literally using your competitors and your favorite products and analyzing them. And that gives you an instinct, and it hones your instinct without having to make the mistakes yourself, right? Because you get to see thousands of experiments that are happening in real time all across the internet. You can sort of witness some of those and learn from them. So those are some ways to help make these decisions. But again, you also just have to accept you're not going to get above 30 or 40% accuracy. So that's fine. You can still have massive wins with 30 to 40% accuracy. You just have to have lots of at-bats.
I'm having flashbacks to my enterprise B2B SaaS days where really it just mattered like what your top 10 customers thought about any feature launch. Is that kind of like what you think about for like your big platform rollouts? Is I want to reach out to my top 10 instructors and understand what they think about it?
Yeah, It changes over time. So yeah, when we started, it was really just, the top 10 instructors, and we pretty much built the product for them. But as I told you earlier, our top instructors ended up actually not being our long-term instructors. We ended up changing. So I would say that sometimes, and enterprise software companies also have this problem, your top customers are actually like not the people you want to solve for. You might actually want to solve for your mid tier of customers or your lowest tier of customers. It really depends. At Maven, we are focused on the sort of, I'd say the like 5th percentile to the 50th percentile, or maybe the 30th percentile. I'd say that's like 5 to 30 is kind of our range. So the top instructors need bespoke things that we try to solve in other ways. We just give them really good support, and we're very, responsive to their needs. But the 5th percentile to the 30th percentile instructors, those are the people that we really feel like are our core, that we can scale, and that we should be getting feedback from. And so, yeah, we have I'm on text relationship with like 15 to 20 of our instructors. I'm on email with 50, and I'm on Slack with another 10 or 20 of them. So I'm constantly in touch with them, and I'm not even the person who's the most in touch with our instructors in the company. So if I, as CEO, am not involved in what they think, you can imagine what our team is doing.
Okay. So in this world where it's hard to look back at your feature launches and say what's successful, how do you do planning? How do you make your strategic bets on the product side? You already walked through kind of your ICP being that 5th to 30th percentile instructor for the product, but how do you go further? How do you think about, okay, these are the needs I'm going to target this quarter or this half, and how do you structure that?
I mean, I would say that I'm highly gut and intuitive driven. So it's funny because people on my team would probably tell you I'm very process oriented, and I am. But at the end of the day, the final decision, I understand, is very gut driven. So I follow a pretty strict process. I think about, I'm basically always in the first 5 to 10 years of a company trying to grow the business, right? Like that's all that matters is, and you have a growth goal. Like our growth goal is usually like 2x or 3x. And I'm trying to hit it. I'm trying to work backwards from what would it take to get there. And so you make your product decisions based on what you think is going to be the most likely to help you do that. And you have some principles, that help you. So one is you have to have an excellent product. So you can't just do a bunch of growth hacky things. If the instructors, in our case, our supply side, don't like using Maven, they're going to sour on us as a business, and they're going to be likely to churn. And so there's a level of investment that we make almost every quarter on product excellence that does not have a direct ROI return on growth, but has an indirect ROI return on retention, as well as we think on growth. The second principle is that we need to make sure that a significant amount of our resources are going towards growth bets that can 2 or 3x the business on their own. And so we figure out what we think the best idea is. And one of the benefits we have is that we have a marketplace. So we have literally hundreds of instructors that are experimenting with ways to grow their courses. And we take the ideas that we think are the most scalable and we try to build for them. And so our ideas often come from the experimentation that's happening by the supply side of our marketplace. And then finally, you have to accept, at least at Maven, there's a natural cadence to Maven's growth. We do not see results in 2 weeks or a month. At Sprig, we saw results of something we did in 1 to 2 weeks, right? We might take a month to make sure that it was statistically significant, but we basically knew what was happening because buying food is a daily habit. And so you have this user base, which is a lot smaller, right? But they're buying every day. And as a result of the fact that they're buying every day, within 2 weeks, they're going to tell you whether or not the thing that they're buying is something they want to continue to buy or not. On Maven, the typical buyer is buying once a quarter or once every 6 months. And so how do you make decisions and so what we do actually is we rotate. We make a set of decisions. We let them cook for 3 to 6 months, and we rotate and work on a different part of the product area. And then we come back to the other one. And we found this sort of cadence where we allow ourselves to spend, 1 month shipping a product, a new feature or a product or whatever. And then we spend another month on a different part of the product and another month on a different part of the product. Then we go back and look at what happened over the last quarter and try to make decisions on what we're going to do going forward.
Oh, very cool. Can you give an example of like a big product change and kind of why you had to wait and then what it looked like 3 to 6 months later?
Yeah, it's a great question. We made a huge bet on our on hybrid courses about a year ago. So a year ago, almost all Maven courses were fully live. And it turns out that while we believe in cohort-based, we realize that there are a lot of students who want to be able to watch recordings and get more efficient information when they need it, and who want to be able to review information and sort of have that hybrid approach while still having some live content. So we saw a couple of instructors. We weren't even sure it was a good idea, but we had a couple of instructors who started to build hybrid courses anyways on Maven, and they'd be like clamoring for extra features for it. And we were like, you're a minority right now. You don't matter. But eventually they ended up showing us that they had like better NPS often because they had both video based and live, components to their course, which students preferred. So, but it took us about 6 to 12 months to come to conviction that we should build this. Probably another like 2 months to build it, and we shipped a basic version of our hybrid course product, and we tried to ship it as fast as possible. So, maybe it was more like 5 weeks or 6 weeks we shipped it. And which is a big change, right? This is a huge change to the underlying syllabus and things of the product offering, because it used to be a calendar and now it has to have, recorded content that you can watch whenever you want. And so we made this change, and, within a month or two, the adoption of this was not that great. I don't remember the exact numbers, but, it was a significant minority, but it was still a minority of people, of courses, had started to adopt this feature. But we had conviction that those courses were, what we were looking at were those courses having success with the feature? Were students responding to this feature? And they were. So even though we had low adoption and there were a bunch of instructors who did not adopt it because they're teaching their course once a quarter, so it's going to take 3 to 6 months for them to adopt it. They might not adopt it in the first cohort. They might adopt it in the second cohort, which is 4 to 6 months later. Over time, we stuck with it. And over the course of the last year, now all Maven courses offer more value than they ever have before, because not only do you have the live time with the instructor, but the instructors are now finding it worthwhile to record content that adds and provides more richness to the material that is being taught live. It allows you to do more discussions live and less, rote lecturing because it's in video format or it's in written format. And it also allows the instructor to scale, which means that they are likely to build a better course. They can spend more time on the course and less time on teaching. So this has been a huge win for us, but it took about 6 to 12 months to actually get the results of it. And now we're, super confident it was a great decision, but it took a while.
Okay. I like that. And how do you structure like your various product areas? Because you mentioned you'd rotate away from hybrid course. Sounds like it's basically touching all the key instructor surface areas. So what other part of the product can you move to?
Yeah, I mean, so keep in mind that we don't need to structure things we don't need to be that structured because we only have, 18 people. So as a result of the small team size, it's very easy for us to, simply, just intuitively rotate from one subject area to another. So areas that we might rotate to. 1 month, we might work on email. And we might do a bunch of stuff on our email system, both in terms of instructor tooling, but also in terms of our own homegrown email system. Another month, we might work on discovery. And we'll try to improve the way that you can find and view courses on our marketplace. Another month, we might work on recommendations, which is an input to discovery and to email, but is not directly in those two camps, right? It's sort of a developer tool. That's not the right word. It's a infrastructure thing that allows you then, that enables other product offerings. So we would work on our course recommendation algorithm. Another month we might work on lightning lessons and improving our free to paid funnel, which is what lightning lessons is for. And then within the admin side of the product, there is probably, I think there's like 8 to 10 tabs. There's your admin, just your basic controls. There's the landing page, editor, and what it looks like to the end user. There's the syllabus, there's events, there's community, there's the people tab where you get to see the other people in your cohort. And there's a bunch more that there's your earnings, there's your analytics. So we're always rotating between all of these things. And we're just picking whatever we feel like is going to make the biggest impact and going after it.
Okay, got it. And you mentioned like months. Do you guys think in months? What is kind of the unit that your engineering team operates on? Are they operating on sprints? Are they doing that in a tool like Linear? How are you guys taking kind of, these are the feature ideas all the way through to how you develop them?
Yeah, this is a great example where I didn't fully answer the question and you helped me, so thank you. Because I think this is the second part to that statement that I made, which is that every month we do a planning cycle basically. So we review what the results were last month, and then we plan for what the next month is, and we use a pod structure that changes. So sometimes we'll have 3 engineers on a pod and 2 on another. Sometimes we'll have 3 pods where we have 2 engineers, and 1 engineer, or 1.5, because my co-founder is our 6th engineer, and he often he codes a fair bit as well. So I would say that every month we do a retro on last month, and then we start to plan for the following month and what the pod structure is going to look like and what bets we're going to make. And I'm fairly grateful to have Rishin, our head of product, who's extremely process oriented in this way, and sort of runs a clear and transparent process in which everyone gets to share their input, but that the final decisions get made by essentially mostly him, and occasionally I'll step in and sort of override him, but it's very rare. So he's pretty much making all of these decisions.
Got it. And what comes to like a monthly planning process? How developed does an idea need to be for you guys to prioritize it?
Another great question, because we actually do a funny thing. Maybe other people do this too, but we have scoping time and we have shipping time. So essentially, we are not always allocating resources to building things. We are often allocating resources to scoping things. So we'll have a designer spend 2 weeks scoping a project that we are not 100% sure we're going to actually build. And we'll allocate them to a pod that is essentially a scoping group of people that are trying to figure out, like, what are they going to do? What should we do about the discovery? Like, what could we do if we push this forward? And I think that's been really, really successful for us.
Okay. And then when do you come into a feature? Do you typically do like a product review on the designs before they start coding, or how do you kind of get involved as the founder who's always partly head of product?
Yeah. I mean, every week we do a product review meeting where people sort of bring up the topic that they're working on that week. It's usually our designers or our product lead who are bringing things in, and we're looking at whatever they're building. It's not just me. It's also my co-founder Shreyans. It's our head of supply. It's our head of demand. So it's the leadership team plus the 2 designers who, in our company at Maven, our designers are very much a sort of extension of the leadership team. So we view them as quite significant contributors to the product roadmap, and a significant part of sort of creating what the product is going to look like. Not just as narrow as designing the flows, but sometimes often, thinking about the PRD level items, like, is the product going to do X or is it going to do Y? And so the designers are also in that meeting. And so this meeting happens every week, and we're reviewing everything all the time, basically. Also, we have a very good async culture. So on top of that weekly meeting, in between, there are channels for each pod, and those channels are relatively active. They're not super active because I don't want them to be like 50 messages a day, right? I mean, if 50 posts a day, of course you're going to have a lot of messages in the threads, but 50 like unique posts, like we don't want that. We want, 3 to 5 or 10 maybe in a really heavy project period. And so, but often those posts are looms, sharing, or they're links to Figma. And so you're able to look at projects along the way, in between the Thursday to Thursday is when our product reviews are.
This episode is brought to you by Addio, the next generation CRM. Imagine a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and actually intuitive. Addio makes that a reality. As I've profiled in the Product Growth newsletter, setting up Addio takes less than a minute, and within seconds of syncing your email and calendar, you'll see your relationships in one place, enriched with valuable data, including things like relationship strength. Addio lets you build Zapier-style automations, create powerful reports, and works for any go-to-market motion, from PLG to sales-led. Addio is designed for the next era of companies like yours. And companies like yours shouldn't have to deal with inflexible, one-size-fits-all CRMs. Join industry leaders like 11 Labs, Replicate, and Modal. Head to addio.com/productgrowth and you'll get 15% off your first year. That's ATTIO.com/productgrowth. Cool. And what's the rest of your product stack? So we heard about Loom, we heard about Figma, and Slack. Those seem like three of the kind of key platforms. Are you guys using Notion, Linear? Are you guys using a tool like Sprig or Amplitude, or what is the rest of your stack?
You just named our entire stack, basically. The only thing I'd add is Metabase. So yes, we use Sprig for surveys, and we love it. I'm an investor, so I'm also just a fan of it. And we use Notion religiously. We do also use Google Docs, by the way. Like, we find that editing is just way, way better on Google Docs. Like, I can't wait for Notion to enable editing in a way that's as good as Google Docs, but I'm sure that was like a super hard technical problem. And it's both a super hard product and UX problem, and it's also a super hard technical problem. So Notion hasn't gotten there yet, but we use Google Docs a fair bit. For like all my social posts are written in Google Docs, and then they're edited. But all of our product PRDs are written in Notion because they don't need as much editing. They need commenting and conversation.
Okay, got it. So for the heavy copywriting, you need that like suggested edits feature. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly right. Yes.
Okay. There you go. Note to Notion product team right there. Okay. You recently advertised a growth product manager role. And I thought that was interesting again, because a little bit earlier than I typically see it, kind of the second PM hire that you would be making. What was your thinking behind that, and what will be the focus of this person?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting to the point where there's enough product surface area that we need a second PM. Rishan also kind of doubles as our analytics guru, as well as helps me run a lot of the business strategy sort of work. And so as a result, he's got a lot of things going on. And so we want to bring in someone to be focused on growth specifically. We think that, Maven is a marketplace. It relies, like, our value is actually growth. It's very different from like Figma, right? Like, you use Figma, and if there are 100,000 people using it or 50,000 people using it, it's kind of the same. There are some natural network effects of how familiar people are. And then of course, Figma has more money if more people use it, so they're able to spend money, but there's not a direct benefit to having lots of people using Figma when you're using Figma. Maven is the exact opposite. Like, Maven is completely useless if nobody is using it. Like, we could have this beautiful product that teaches courses that allows you to build a course in a really easy way. But if we don't have 1,000 instructors next year on the platform, then you as a consumer are getting a much worse experience than if we only have 10. So growth is critical to a marketplace, and growth PMs tend to get a lot of outsized benefits by working in a marketplace because they're very important to those companies. And so we're looking for a growth PM to come in and essentially run the product side of our growth marketing. They'll also do some growth work. Every growth PM has to do like 50-50, right? 50% they'll have a team of engineers. So this person will have 2 engineers and a designer. Again, we use the pod structure, so that changes sometimes, but most of the time it'll be 2 engineers and a designer. But they'll also potentially want to figure out how to hack YouTube for Maven, or figure out how to improve our LinkedIn posts. Not the post that I'm writing, but more if our students are recommending on LinkedIn, right? So those are areas that I could see this person owning as well. And they'll also own lightning lessons, which is our big webinar product that I've been really happy. The last like 2 weeks, people have been saying really nice things about in public. So it's been great because it's been like 6 months since we launched this thing, and people have liked it the whole time, but it's been fun to watch getting a little bit of praise for. And I'd say that I think it's still very early for Lightning Lessons as a product. I think it has a lot of room to improve and grow and become a major offering that Maven provides the public, which is just like free 30-minute tactical lessons on things that you need to learn that allow you to keep fresh in your career and are a lot better than the sort of, junk you get on some social media content, and at the same time are, easy and free. So to sign up for.
Got it. So really, because you're a marketplace, because they'll be operating across a ton of different surface areas, you're hiring for a growth-focused PM. Talking about growth, one of the growth areas that you guys seem to have done a really, really good job on, which I think any business would be envious of, is moving up your NRR, your net revenue retention. So you moved it up from 70 to 130%. What were the big levers for you to grow that NRR?
Yeah, and I think the second year numbers are even more impressive. When we started, we had something like a 10% or 4%. I don't remember. It was super low, like single digits NRR. So essentially like all of our instructors churned, our first set of instructors. And we ended up having to make a big change. And now we have incredibly retentive instructors, or retained instructors. So I think this comes back to the strategy conversation we had earlier. We started with creators as our primary audience of instructors. And honestly, like they liked but did not love Maven. It was a lot of work to switch from the sort of like fly by the seat of your pants, post every day, dealing with, 5 posts a day sort of thing, to like dedicating an hour and a half to teach a class. These are like kind of at odds, and it didn't seem like they would be at odds, but they were. And so we ended up shifting to the operator or expert. And that was a huge decision that dramatically probably gave us half the gains of the NRR improvement that you're talking about. And by the way, just to clarify, like we don't have recurring revenue. So when we're calculating NRR, what we're talking about is GMV retention. So, how much money did an instructor make in 2022, divided or underneath the amount of money that someone made in 2023. So 2023 divided by 2022, GMV from that cohort of instructors who started their first course in 2022. So that's what we mean by NRR. And the NRR, the other benefit that we got is we started building our marketplace. So when we started Maven, we had this vision that we would be like Substack. And it's funny because Substack eventually also became kind of a marketplace and is really good at recommending now. But we thought at the time that Substack was really smart because it allowed creators to run their own business, but still did not do the demand side generation that most marketplaces have to do. That ends up taking 70 to 80% of your resources. So we thought we'd put all the time and money into product development. We realized like instructors really wanted us to bring students for us to deserve our value and to use us. And so we launched the marketplace, and the marketplace has been an astounding success. And has dramatically improved the retention and also the earnings of our instructors. So it helps with NRR, both in terms of the number of instructors who continue to teach, but also the amount of money they're making.
Got it. I heard in a prior podcast, but I think it was almost 2 years ago, that Maven delivers about a quarter of the students for instructors and instructors bring the other 3 quarters. Is that ratio different now?
That's about the ratio. It wasn't a quarter 2 years ago. It was probably like 10% 2 years ago.
Got it.
And then it's been 25% for about 6 months to a year or so. And we're thinking we're going to get the next bump. One of the interesting things that's happened over the last year is like our instructors have also just gotten better at marketing too. So we've grown a lot, but actually our instructors have gotten, Lightning Lessons ended up being a situation where we helped our instructors market. And but we give them credit for any, if they bring in a student for free and then that student buys their course, we still give them credit for it in this 25%. So I think we're adding more value than we were before, but our actual direct attribution hasn't changed that much in the last 6 months or so because the instructors have had so much success as well.
Okay. Another element that I imagine would be important for growth in a business like this, and I know it has been for businesses like Reforge, is getting companies instead of individuals to pay for courses. What have been the most successful things for Maven along that area?
We are strictly B2C right now. I mean, we enable B2B, so we have a bulk purchase option. We're about to roll out a feature that makes it easier to buy multiple courses for a given company. But we're not selling to businesses right now. And that's really a focus thing. From my experience at Udemy and what I saw about that market, it's really easy to enter B2B late. It's really hard to do B2C once you're doing B2B. So I felt like, we have a strength in B2C and we can just keep growing B2C and then eventually add B2B. Because business customers are really willing to switch, and you just have to get, your first million is just, 50, 100 customers. I don't know. I'm making up that number, but it's a small number of customers who have to switch. Whereas your consumers, it's really hard to build consumer momentum from scratch. It takes a ton of effort. So we're focused on consumer right now, and then we'll add B2B when we feel like consumer is, doing really, really well and kind of on its own path.
Okay. And as I know, in the B2C side of product management content, the churn can be difficult. So what has been useful in keeping the buyer side churn and improving that area?
Yeah, we think it's a function primarily of supply density. So, we don't expect someone to buy, 20 courses in a year. We do have people who've done that, but it's not the norm. Our average student is going to, buy a course like once a quarter, once every 6 months or so. And so what we need to do is make sure that we have something valuable for them when they're at that point in their career where they want to level up again. And so the more courses we have that are high quality from great instructors, that the more likely that you're going to be able to repeat on Maven. Because we see that most of our students are buying like 1 to 3 courses a year. It's just how many of those are on Maven. That's really the question. And so right now, our goal is just to increase that percentage. So, maybe today it's 20% of those are on Maven, and eventually we want it to be 50. And if it's 50, then the frequency will go up, and the retention will go up. The other thing is you have to look at retention on an annual basis, not just on a quarterly basis, because and then finally, Lightning Lessons. Offering a free product is dramatically boosts retention because people can use it without having to pay for a full course. And then when they're ready to dive deeper into their learning, they're already using your product and kind of know it.
Got it. So what have been the key metrics that you have focused on, and how have those changed over time?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we're like pretty growth focused. So we've always viewed like GMV as our North Star. There's some debate within the company right now to switch to enrollments as a North Star. And I actually think this argument is like, I prefer GMV, but I think it might be slightly better for the team to be motivated around enrollments. So I think it's more of an optics thing than the reality is they're quite inextricably linked, and you're going to care about both. So we really care about that as our top tier metric is GMV. And we're just basically looking like, instructor earnings. Like we want our instructors to make money. Like that is our number one goal. And then, of course, we look at retention of instructors and students. So we're looking at satisfaction of students as a leading indicator on whether or not they would retain. That's, course ratings as well as qualitative feedback about the course as well. We read a lot of the course ratings. And then on the instructor side, the metrics we're tracking are, we track a lot of metrics to be clear, but the ones that are most important are like, how often are they adopting our features? Like every feature that we launch, we look at whether or not we're usually trying to get to 80% adoption, which is actually really, really hard when you have entrepreneurs as your customers, right? Our customers are essentially running their own businesses and they have their own styles and they want to do it their own way. And like, we need to respect that. And so if we can get the 80% of people to adopt a feature we've launched, like that shows that it's really valuable. So those are examples of metrics that we care about.
Okay, but it's really been that constant drumbeat of GMV, maybe enrollments in the future, but that's been your North Star output metric.
Right.
So last question about Maven. A lot of people listening, Alex Hormozi has taken over the internet over the last 2 years, and he has supported Skool. So if people are considering, or how would you compare the two? What are the differences?
It's funny, like when we started Udemy, at the same time that we started, a company called Kajabi got started. And Kajabi is now, the biggest in its space, and Udemy is the biggest in its space. And it's funny because you would think that these are the same market. You would think that Skool and Maven are the same. They're both online education. They both have a form of a creator who is teaching courses and selling to the public. But actually, they're like completely different markets. There's the customer for Skool on the supply side. First of all, it's a SaaS product, I believe, and so the business model is different. They don't bring customers for you; they just sell you a product, and you are paying for it and you use it. And so Skool is targeted at solopreneur creators who are sort of in the YouTube world. They're in the YouTube creator world. I don't know how to explain it other than that. It's a different world. And we're in the LinkedIn operator world. Like our instructors are serious about teaching things that people actually need to use in their workplace. And you will not see that on Skool. I mean, you might see some, but very few. They will be teaching more lifestyle-y things. They will be teaching courses that they'll be building communities that are a little bit more, I don't know how to explain it, but I've always had trouble explaining the difference between Kajabi and Udemy, but you kind of know it when you see it. Like there's, and so it's how creator minded the persona is of the supply. And what this means is from a demand perspective, Skool is irrelevant to demand. Like no one goes to Skool and says, oh, I want to join a new school. Like no one does that. On Maven, people go on Maven, product managers all the time go on Maven and say, ooh, they'll do it just to browse, just to see what's hot in their space, to understand what people are, what's popular so that they know what skills they need to be thinking about. And then second, they might come with a specific need, like I want to get better at influence. So, okay, I'll take Satish's Influence Without Authority course. I want to get better at AI. All right, I'm going to take Mikdad or Marilee's AI product management course. So we are actually very different from Skool and don't view them. I barely know anything about them other than the fact that I, have heard their name a few times, but I don't do any competitive research. We don't waste our time with it because honestly, we saw that with Udemy versus Kajabi. Like there was very limited advantage to us viewing Kajabi as a serious competitor to us. We were really just two different companies in two different spaces.
Got it. Yeah, I would say LinkedIn operator versus YouTube creator actually explains it very well. That's the difference I've seen between the two platforms as well. So that's Maven. You yourself have said you were fired from Udemy. What happened?
Yeah, it's funny because people have taken what I've said and they take all the worst parts and don't think about the best parts, but I'll try to retell this story. I was 21 years old. or 22 years old. I can't remember exactly, but when I started Udemy with Aaron and Oktai, they had already been working on it for 3 years before I even got there. And they had like stopped working on it a bunch of times and restarted it, so it wasn't 3 years solid work, but they had worked on it for a while. They had built a lot of product. I think they had over 100,000 lines of code when I showed up. And so I was very much the third co-founder at Udemy. I was the most public because my job was basically to be the sales and marketing leader at Udemy. But I was also I didn't have control of the company. And Aaron and I butted heads a bit over this. I think in particular we butted heads because our styles were different. I am a more intense, leader. I'm more direct. I want a culture that's very direct, and Aaron is honestly also pretty direct. And I think we are like very similar, but just barely disagreed on this. And we disagreed enough that it created some tension. And I think the thing that added to it was that I was learning and I made a few mistakes. Like I was not the best. I have always been someone who will occasionally offend my team. Okay. I will always occasionally offend someone who's a friend of mine. Like it's just a reality because I'm so direct and I view the world, and my inner dialogue is like this, right? Like if I don't speak to other people in a way that is different the way I speak to myself, but my inner dialogue is not in the norm. It's in it's in 20%. It's in the 10 or 20 percentile of, how direct I am about things and how I think. And so sometimes there are people, and I'd say it's like particularly true in modern culture, who are a little bit more sensitive. They don't like being called out, or they don't like being, told that their work isn't very good. And they didn't love that. They gave feedback to Aaron. Aaron freaked out and basically thought that it was worse than I think those people intended it for it to be. And over the course of a few months, a few other honestly very random things happened. Someone quit because of something someone someone other than me did at the company, but Aaron thought it was my fault. And, pretty soon Aaron was like, look, you got to go. And I think that there's a ton of different factors here. There's the fact that you can't have two CEOs at a company. So I was kind of a CEO because I was the public face. I raised all of our money. I was also hiring 50% of our team, so I ran a lot of the business. But I deferred to Aaron, and I would still defer to Aaron if we were working together because I think he's freaking brilliant, and I think he's an amazing CEO. And so I deferred to him when it was necessary, but I was still doing a lot of CEO tasks. So you can't have two CEOs at a company. We needed to have better founder communication so that we could understand what each other wanted. And if we had a coach or something between the two of us, I think we would have been great, because to this day, Aaron and I talk regularly, right? We talk probably once a month, maybe once a quarter. He comes and stays at my house when he's up here for Carbon Health. I was, privy to a lot of the things that have been happening at Udemy over the years, as he's been chairman of the board. And so we've had a really good relationship. It just, a bunch of random things happened that just didn't work out. And then the other thing is I learned as a leader how to balance out my directness. And so honestly, part of that is just hiring and screening for people who like it and who appreciate it and like a culture that's a little bit more efficient, because the benefit of directness is that you get things done faster. The challenge is that it is emotionally can be very hard for certain people. And so this is the balance that I've learned to screen for, and also I've learned to soften. And I think I'm a calmer leader than I was, when I was 22. So that's a lot of what happened at Udemy.
Got it. I think that'll have a lot of lessons that ring true for a lot of people. And as a leader who's pretty direct, I was putting myself in those shoes and thinking about how I could potentially be less direct. Are there any other lessons? Because I guess one could...
on that, Akash, it's cultural, right? To be clear, what's really happening is I'm an Indian man who was raised in the environment of, I get home and my mom talks about how fat I am, right? This is and it's normal. It's not, no one thinks it's weird. No one in India thinks that that's a messed up thing to say. It's just oh yeah, you're teasing me about my weight. Haha. No one gets psychologically damaged. I mean, I'm sure that there are people who get psychologically damaged, but most people just think that's funny or just like deal with it, and maybe they internalize some of that trauma, and you could use a bunch of modern lingo to like talk about that. But I think it's like pretty normal. And so I have like learned to adapt to a very Western culture that's very different. Like my wife is white, and like her parents would never, ever, ever talk about her weight. I mean, she doesn't, like this isn't a problem that either of us have. We're both decently fit. But like the point is like they wouldn't say anything even if they were. Like this is not the way that their culture is. And so, taking an Indian man and thrusting him in, and being raised in a household like that and thrusting him into a work environment where people are from very different backgrounds was a challenge. And it still is to this day sometimes. But honestly, like at Maven, one thing that I'm really proud of is like we just had an offsite, and I got to hang out with all of our team. And, most of our team has been here over 2 years. We have a bunch of team members who are here for 3 years. And from all accounts, they're extremely happy and love our culture. So I have been able to, and this is probably the thing that I'm most proud of at Maven. And it's not something I cared about at Udemy, to be honest, but I care so much about it now as a more mature and older leader. I'm really proud of just how much camaraderie our team feels, both towards each other and also to Maven, the company. And I think to some extent that reflects on my style. But I honestly think it also has a lot of other factors. There's a lot of great people. And we've screened really well for them. So funny enough, like this has kind of worked out for me, but it took a lot of work to learn how to do this well.
Yeah, definitely there's a cultural element to that there that any Indian male listening, probably especially the first children, are pretty used to. So another topic on Udemy, and this is one that a lot of listeners actually keyed in and wanted to hear about too, is you've yourself said that something I've always regretted about Udemy is the discount branding. And Udemy is kind of really well known for that now. Can you explain?
Yeah, I mean, we had a very clear philosophy at Udemy, which was grow at all costs, right? We were just trying to grow the business every single year. We were willing to do whatever it took. And I think that that's really good and it's really healthy. And it's better to be spiky on a culture like that than it is to waver and try to balance it out all the time. So this grow at all cost culture was led to a lot of experimentation, led to a lot of our big wins. And one of our biggest wins early on was we would discount the course in, promotions. And it started with like a 25% or a 50% discount. And eventually we realized that if we ratcheted up the discount from 50% to 80% to 90%, it would, work. And we would be able to get a lot of sales when we have run discounts. The problem ended up being that we had no limitation. We were like JCPenney, right? Like we just ran a discount every time we could. And so people got to know Udemy when we started, Udemy wasn't a brand, right? Of course, no startup starts as a brand. They start as, this random website that someone just happens upon and then turns off of, right? And so like people don't remember who you are or what's going on. And so in the beginning, the cost of discounting is actually really, really low. The brand cost of discounting is really, really low because no one knows who you are anyways. But year 5, year 7, year 10, Udemy is a thing. Like if I name Udemy even to like I will randomly be playing soccer and someone will come up to me and be like, "Oh, you started Udemy?" And I'll be like, "You don't even work in tech. Like you don't know anything about my world, but you still are aware of this company." So yeah, we're not as well known as Airbnb, but it's it's a brand. It has a name to it. And the problem was that as we transitioned into being a brand, we were still doing this discounting, and it was super effective. And at the same time, it created a perception that Udemy is really low budget and low quality. And that's really unfortunate because I think Udemy actually has probably the best content out there. I would put it up against, Masterclass, LinkedIn Learning. I'd put it up against Coursera. Like I think Udemy honestly, genuinely has as good or better content than all those companies. And yet we don't have the perception of having as good content. And if we had, then I think we'd be even further ahead than we are. We are the largest company by revenue of all of those companies. And honestly, other than Coursera, we're significantly bigger than everyone else. Unfortunately, we are not perceived that way. And you see that in the public markets that have not taken Udemy as seriously. And you also see that in the private markets where, our perception is still relatively discount focused. And luckily, we've delivered a lot of value to, I would assume it's millions of people. I know we've had hundreds of millions of purchases, but I'm just trying to think about how many people actually took the courses and finished them and sort of really made life changes. And because of that value, that has counteracted some of the discount branding. And we still, I think, have quite a good brand, despite the fact that we have a discount brand.
Yeah, it's interesting how you just fall down that discounting rabbit hole. At one point I was leading growth at ThreadUp and we went too deep and we had to suck ourselves out. We started with the 20% off your first order and we were like, whoa, conversion rates went up a lot. Okay, 30%. Wow, conversion rates went up more than this is costing us. 40%, 50%. But then we realized that 50% that our LTV, our repeat rates, our brand, also just the type of people we were attracting was totally different. And so we had to kind of walk that back. And I think nowadays it's more like a 30% off first order.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's tough because, Udemy also carved out a niche that was probably in line with what the market wanted, which is Udemy is for people who don't have a lot of money and who have a hunger to learn something. And yeah, there are plenty of very successful rich people who are on Udemy. I have a friend who's COO at a $1 billion plus company and uses Udemy regularly right now to learn things. So let's be clear, there's a huge diversity of people teaching and learning on Udemy. However, the majority, probably a small majority, like maybe 60, 70% or something, are the core target customer is likely, and again, I don't work at Udemy, I haven't worked there for 10 years, so I don't know this as a fact. But my guess would be that it's someone who's lower, earlier in their career, slightly lower income, maybe from a foreign, we also have a big international business. That's all public information, so you can look that one up. And so the discount branding might have actually been in line with them. They are making a budgetary decision. They're very cost conscious. And so there wasn't horrible to be discount focused, but I think it created a little bit of it would have been nice to have softened it a bit in order to create a more positive halo effect. Apple does do some discounting, even Apple does discounting, right? But they do it in a very, very, very limited and narrow way. And so it's all about what, where you are on that spectrum. Even the best brands out there, all of the car brands do insane amounts of discounts, right? All the time. And you don't necessarily view them all as low end. So you just have to balance it out.
So you've said that I engaged founder mode a few years ago and it completely changed my experience as a leader. I feel like this is the current leadership trend. What does founder mode mean to you?
Yeah, it's funny because it just puts a name to something that people have already been talking about, right? This was not a new thing. And honestly, I don't think the post really shed that much light on founder mode. It was more of a motivational or inspirational post. And so a lot of the feedback that's come from it is, I think, also unwarranted, the negative feedback as well as the positive. I love the term because what it means really is I believe that organizations are more successful when there is clarity of vision and clarity of culture. Founder mode is about taking ownership of the clarity of vision and clarity of culture that you want to create and making that clear to your team in action, not just in words. So that means letting go of team members who don't quite fit. That means making bold decisions about how you're going to take the product, and sometimes, and not always, but sometimes making those decisions despite the fact the team may not agree. It means being your authentic self as a leader. I'm someone who likes to collaborate. I do not like to make decisions alone. I agonize over decisions. It's not a good thing, like the way that I make decisions if I were just on my own without anyone else. So I actually am highly collaborative. But the one thing that I've changed is I've realized that I need to make the final decisions on the most important things. And so I put my foot down a few different times. When we were letting go people, I was I was very insistent on a few of the departures that we made. Even though the leader who that person reported to wasn't 100% sure, I was going to be right. But I really made sure that happened. I was fairly insistent on some cultural aspects. An example is like, I'm a big believer in feedback in public. I honestly think it's kind of crazy that you would like be in a meeting, people, and this is like normal, but this is to me just insane. Like, you're in a meeting, you disagree with something someone said, but you're going to like wait till the meeting's over and then call them for 15 minutes and give them feedback on what they did. This is the optimal way that the modern feedback culture like says that you should operate. That is incredibly inefficient. It treats people like children. And I just do not appreciate the level of sort of just how patronizing I think it is. Look, people are adults. We all have like, we live in a free society. We can leave our jobs if we don't like them. Like, I have been very freed by the idea that we should provide feedback in real time. Now, if my feedback is going to be highly personal and it's going to offend someone, like truly, like it's actually offensive, not the person is very sensitive, but the person is like a normal human being who like I'm being mean to, that is totally unacceptable. That is not what I'm saying. But if I think a PRD is not well written, I'll just be like, it's not well written. Like, hey, you could do better than this. Like, this isn't good. Like, and that means in the meeting that everyone hears that message. So everyone can read that PRD and be like, okay, this is not the standard at this company. So now all of a sudden, instead of just teaching the one person who I had a 15-minute phone call with afterwards, I'm teaching everybody what the standards are. And by the way, someone else can come in, and this happens all the time at Maven, and be like, Gagan, I don't know, I think this is pretty good. And I'll be like, and like, honestly, the thing that I'm working on now is like, I need to in real time be like, yeah, you're right. It's actually, I'm probably being a little too critical. Like, that's something I'm working on. But like, the point is that I've created a culture that reflects my values. And we had to part ways with leaders who didn't agree with this and who did not want to give feedback in meetings and would always sort of tiptoe around things and be very, very sensitive to the feelings of an employee. When in reality, like today, I don't think that our team is like, I think our team is pretty happy. Like, they stay around and like they're super motivated and they're shipping amazing products. Like they're doing a great job. And so I think that it's actually really worked. And it took about 6 to 12 months after I made some really tough decisions in a row. And then I had a couple of people reach out to me and be like, Gagan, I'm so glad you did that. Like, thank you. Like, the company is so much more efficient. Like, I wasn't sure it was a good idea, but it worked. And so those are some examples of things that I've done that engage founder mode. Honestly, I still struggle with it. I still feel like I don't always, it's a balance. Like you don't want to be a totalitarian dictator. Like, the best ideas at Maven almost never come from me. They come from other people at the company. So if I were making all the decisions, that would be very bad. The company would fail. But sometimes at important moments, I need to be willing to be contrarian and make the hard decision. And that's what founder mode means.
Love it. Sometimes you just have to, you have to admit that the founder, was there from the beginning, has the intuition, having been the first product person, the first customer support person, the first ops person, and might know what something is. So one of the things that I really admire about you, and we've been in touch for several years now, is I get the feeling you're in touch with a lot of people. I think you mentioned like, you had like 20 people on Slack, like 40 people over email. Like, you seem to be on top of all your inboxes. What is your approach to managing this deluge of messages?
This is a great question. I only recently even realized that this was something that I spent a lot of time on. But if you've ever read, there's this great Ben Franklin, in his autobiography, he just sort of puts his calendar for the day. And in his calendar, he has like multiple hours set aside for what he calls correspondence. And, highly productive people find correspondence to be a nuisance, right? Like, email is supposed to be bad for you. Like, you're not supposed to do a lot of email. You're not supposed to do a lot of texting, right? These are all things that we are considered counterproductive. I don't know. I'm like just forming this thought, so I actually don't know if I feel that much conviction about it, but I'm going to say it anyways. I actually think that the most productive thing I do sometimes is that I'm really, really good at email and WhatsApp and text message and Twitter DMs. And I basically just have like a ton of systems in place to ensure that I get back to people quickly, that I prioritize what's important, and that I'm basically actually like quite responsive. And you know, this is something that I do. So the systems I have, first of all, I'm an executive assistant. I made a fairly like tough decision early on, or tough for me because I don't like spending money on myself, but like, especially the company's money. But like, I made a very early decision that I was going to have an executive assistant, even from the first like, you know, year of the company. And I found this absolutely phenomenal human being who I love working with. And she and I have now worked together for over 3 years. And she basically reviews all of my inbox and sorts it for me, and make sure that I respond to people if there's a delay. So the first line of defense for my email is actually my assistant, who drafts probably 60 to 75% of all my responses. And so like most of my email is just me going in and looking at the the to send folder, which is what we call it, and just being like, okay, this looks good. Hey, I need to edit this. Hey, this is off enough that I'm going to give Audrey some feedback on it. So let me send Audrey a little note about how I would like this differently next time. And then I'm going to send it. And like a lot of my email is taken care of. So that cuts probably about 50% of the effort, I'd say, out of my day in terms of email and correspondence. And she does the same thing for Twitter DMs, by the way. And for, she doesn't do text messages or WhatsApp. That's just my private channels, but Twitter DMs, LinkedIn DMs, and email. So that's really amazing. And you know, she's gotten to know me, and sort of, we also use AI to make it faster. So it's really effective. The other thing is that honestly, I just spend time on correspondence, and I'm just willing to do it. So every day I basically go through all my messages at least 3 times a day. I will probably not be, I'm not a productivity guru, and I don't really follow most productivity advice, even though I like it. I agree with it, but I just can't do it myself. So like I am just obsessively on my phone, right? Like in between meetings, like you had to fix something during this podcast, and you know, it'll probably be edited out, but I actually took that moment to open up my phone and just check if there were any important messages.
Building great products is not easy, but today's podcast partner, StatSig, provides a complete platform for product growth. Here's how. Step 1. Keep building features behind feature gates. StatSig will allow you to turn these on whenever everything is ready. Even better, you can just open a feature to 5% of your users to validate it before launching. Step 2. Run A/B experiments easily. You can make data-informed decisions about your product. What's even cooler, StatSig will give you valuable insights based on events you log. And step 3, analyze. StatSig is a full tool for product analytics, session replays, and web analytics. Used by customers like OpenAI and Notion, StatSig is the most modern all-in-one data platform. And best of all, it can be used as fully cloud-hosted or run on top of your data warehouse. So check out statsig.com/growth. And if you reach out, tell them Akash sent you.
And lo and behold, there was only one important message. I responded to it, and I moved forward, and we continued with our podcast interview. And that is just a common behavior that I have. I'm just always on my text and WhatsApp. And I'll be honest, I hate it. I don't like correspondence. Like I don't like communicating with people. I'd rather just like live a free life where I spent, I'm kind of like, I admire how Naval seems to manage his life. Like no communication, there's no expectation of communication. I'm sure he communicates with lots of people, but there's no expectation. Gets up, meditates, spends 3 hours like reading or whatever. And then like, I've always wanted to have this like monk style life, and I've had it. I spent 3 years traveling when I had a lifestyle that's like that. But that's not the reality as a founder, and I have a reason why I'm being a founder right now. So am I going to do this forever? No. But right now, this is what's required of me, and I think it's highly, highly productive because I am able to be everywhere at once because I have created communications channels with people, and everyone knows that if they send me feedback or they ask me a question, they will get an answer relatively quickly. So they're more likely to ask me questions and send me feedback. And like we fix things, right? Like when an instructor messages me and they're right and we screwed something up, like we fix it. So that's because I correspond and I take time to do correspondence, and I think it's part of my job.
Yes, that's 100% why you're on this podcast. I knew I could at least send you a message and I would hear back if you were too busy or something like that. And so it's just a world of difference. Like the average person you send a message to, you're not sure if you're going to get a response, and it might be like 72 hours later versus I feel like if I send you a message, I can expect a response in like 8 hours.
Yeah, and you don't know this, but I've read it within usually like 3 hours if it's a work day, right? And I'll only respond later if it just requires more thought or is like less time sensitive. If it's time sensitive and it's short and easy, I'll respond right away. Like it's very, I don't know. You just have to accept. I think it's more psychological. You just have to accept that correspondence is a big part of your job, and it's something that really creates a network. Right now, not only am I responsive, but most people are responsive to me because I've set this expectation with them. Like I don't like being ghosted. I think it's really rude, and like I think it's rude, but I can also empathize with it. I want to be the type of person who ghosts people more often. So it's like it's all good, but at the same time, it's funny you have these two thoughts at the same time. But yeah, I think most people don't ghost me, so it has a real advantage in my life that I am so communicative.
All right. Fascinating stuff. I wish we could keep going for an hour more, but I have to ask one of my last substantive questions. A lot of people who are listening, especially who have been listening this long to our conversation, they're probably job searching. Like they're thinking about upskilling their product management career. They're thinking about Maven courses, these types of things. Outside of taking Maven courses, what's your best advice for a laid off job seeker?
Yeah, it's a hard time right now. I have a lot of empathy for someone who is a laid off job seeker. And so I have a bunch of different advice for them. The first is to plan for a 6 to 12 month job search at least. And that means changing your housing situation, doing whatever you can to change your financial situation so that you can make that work. And hopefully in the future, everyone will learn this lesson from this era of tech that they should be saving a little bit more and maybe being a little bit more thoughtful about their spending in order to ensure that they have 6 to 12 months in the bank as much as possible. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you're looking for the right, everybody's aperture for what type of person they're willing to hire for a role has narrowed. They are looking for people who have a more clear and specific skill set in the exact job that they're hiring for. So at Maven, we hire our PMs have worked on either a marketplace business. In the case of Rishan, he's worked on a marketplace education business, right? Like that's super narrow. Like how many job seekers out there have that match with every job that they're applying for? Very low. That doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for jobs that are a little bit of a stretch. Like that just like, why would you not spend that extra marginal time? It's like low cost to you. But really what you're doing is you're waiting for that opportunity that's that's a good fit. And then you need to go all in on it. And it's emotionally hard because you'll go all in and you probably have a 25% chance of success at best, but you have to do it. And so you have to go all in and take it seriously and don't groan when they give you an assignment you have to handle your emotions. So the third piece of advice is honestly, like this is an emotional journey more than it is a rationally hard problem. Like it's not that like it will eventually work out for most people. Like most laid off people will get another job. They may change industries. It may end up requiring them to like learn a new skill. It may require that they may end up starting a business, which could be a really exciting thing. They may become a creator, whatever. And my final piece of advice, which is kind of what I just said, is do something to pass the time that's productive, right? Stay fresh, stay sharp, build things. Don't just spend all your time like applying to jobs on LinkedIn. That's not a productive use of your time. Like find the 20 to 30 jobs at any given time, keep them in a spreadsheet that are actually relevant to your skill set, except that you may do a lateral move because you're really at the point you're actually not doing a lateral move, but it'll feel like it because you'll be anchoring to your last job. But what you should anchor to is you not having a job right now. And so you have to anchor to that and say, okay, well, I want to get a job. Then at that job, I need to perform well, and that's how I'm going to rise. And so it's tough, but I have seen people, I'd say 50% of my friends my close friends group in Oakland got laid off. So it's pretty high. That's really high, 50%. And all of them found jobs. And it took some of them a year and a half. Some of them it took 6 months. It just depended on their skill set, how far along they were in their career, and luck, honestly.
Love that advice. And I think the point on managing your emotions is so important because I feel like the longer you go on that, the lower your perception of your self-worth is, but the market's perception of your self-worth isn't going down as quickly as your own. So manage that perception. And luckily, like as far as I've seen, at least, the market has been picking up. Have you also seen that?
I don't have enough signals to tell you whether the market's been picking up or not. We're still seeing incredibly high quality candidates at Maven. So from our perspective, we're like amazed by the choice we have. We still end up with only 1 or 2 people that we like by the end of the process, and that's just kind of how these processes tend to work, I think. But the caliber has gone up dramatically from 2 years ago.
All right. And now we're moving on to the lightning round. These are like the short tidbit questions. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm here. Ready.
What's your favorite interview question?
Okay, job interview question. I don't really think of job interviews that way. I think of job interviews as quite an organic process where I'm trying to get to know someone. But things that I really like to do is I like to understand why people made certain decisions and go super deep on them. So I think that the hardest part about interviews is that people don't, and this is true on like course landing pages on Maven as well, but people don't give enough meat. And they don't realize that people actually want to hear I saw this number, it was 3.5, and this other number was 2.1, and I still went with the 2.1 number because there was another number that I looked at that was like this, and it made me decide that actually the 2.1 was a better conversion rate than the 3.5, or that was a better product decision. And that's the type of detail I want, but it's so hard to get people to do that. So I always just ask someone the same question over and over and over again. It's like, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? And then eventually they usually get to the point. And the faster they get to the point, the more likely they are to get hired.
What's a newsletter you anticipate hitting your mailbox?
I still really like Lenny's newsletter. I genuinely think he does a great job of summarizing what the zeitgeist is today.
What commonly accepted product management advice do you disagree with?
I think product managers should view themselves as the CEOs of their business line. And I think there's a little bit of a sensitivity around that you shouldn't have. You should be responsible and you should have full ownership, and you should try to take full ownership as much as possible of anything that happens. And if you do that with grace, so you're not lording that over anyone, but if you do that with grace, then I think you can be a really effective PM.
Who's an underrated follow on X?
You know who I've really been liking lately, and it's just more just fun, is Ben Lang. He just caught on the scene, and I've really enjoyed it. He's just fun to follow, and I'm rooting for him.
He is awesome.
Shout out Ben Lang.
He helped out with the How Notion Grows piece. Who's an underrated follow on LinkedIn?
My friend Adam Fishman is really good. He's super smart. Another one of my friends, Matt Lerner, is also amazing. Matt Lerner is probably more underrated because I think Adam has more notoriety, but Matt Lerner is fantastic.
Both of them are great. All right, where can listeners find you online, and how can they help you?
Well, you already did it for me. We were looking for a growth PM at Maven. We're at the final stages, so by the time this podcast lasts, it's possible that that's done. But if not, we would love recommendations for a growth PM. And you can find me online. I have a website. Everything on every platform. I'm just Gagan Biyani, my full name. It's a little hard to spell, so you can read it somewhere. But it's once you know it, you can get me anywhere.
All right, everyone. Check out those Maven courses. Support friends of the podcast, Marilee, Satish, Shreyas, Mikbad, and all the other people. Support Gagan, and we'll see you for the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Akash.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find out about the podcast. You can find all the past episodes or learn more about the show at product-growth.com. See you in the next episode.